All right. So, as a socialist political commentator, I obviously try to, as best as I can, make the arguments against the capitalist system as an inherently authoritarian one, and one that relies on the domination, the exploitation, the subjugation of workers in our society and around the world to sort of like a subclass status. And as much as I try, I don't think that I will ever be able to make the case against this kind of an economic system as well as the capitalists do themselves. So here we have Tim Gurner, the founder and CEO of the so-called Gurner Group, who is speaking at this Financial Review Property Summit, and he is basically going to make the case that socialists make all the time for them, which is, again, essentially that capitalism requires the utter, destruction of workers in order to maintain its stability. So let's just go ahead and hear what Tim has to say here.
I think the problem that we've had is that we have people decided they didn't really want to work so much anymore through COVID, and that has had a massive issue on productivity. Tradies have definitely pulled back on productivity. They have been paid a lot to do not too much in the last few years, and we need to see that change. We need to see unemployment rise. Unemployment has to jump 40, 50% in my view. We need to see pain in the economy. We need to remind people that they work for the employer, not the other way around. I mean, there's been a systematic change where employees feel the employer is extremely lucky to have them, as opposed to the other way around. So it's a dynamic that has to change. We've got to kill that attitude, and that has to come through hurting the economy, which is what the whole global, the world is trying to do. The governments around the world are trying to increase unemployment to get that to some sort of normality. And we're seeing it. I think every employer now is seeing it. I mean, there is definitely massive layoffs going off. People might not be talking about it, but people are definitely laying people off, and we're starting to see less arrogance in the employment market, and that has to continue because that will cascade across the cost balance.
Okay. So there's a lot to get into there, obviously. First of all, he says that unemployment, now given this guy's an Australian, he's an Australian guy, and so I don't know if he's talking about specifically in Australia or just around the world. It seems like he was generally talking about the global economy as a whole, but he says unemployment has to jump 40 to 50% in my view. And then he ties that in to some of the economic strategies of most of these capitalist governments around the world. And on that front, just in terms of his economic, analysis of, for example, why the US Federal Reserve has been hiking these interest rates, he's actually 100% correct. This is a perfect example of one of these wealthy multimillionaires just saying the quiet part out loud. And this is something I have been talking about relentlessly on this channel as we have been dealing with these rising interest rates, right? This wasn't because we needed to, tamp down inflation by, trying to get in this excess government spending under control and all of that good stuff, right? No, that's not the cause of inflation. As we talked about on this channel, the overwhelming majority of inflationary pressure during the last couple of years has come from, number one, corporate greed. That has been the larger factor. And number two, supply chain issues that are largely thanks to the capitalist system in this era of sort of neoliberalism or globalization around the world, where our supply chains were so interconnected and dependent on other sources around the world that when COVID hit, it all got completely fucked up. Okay, so I appreciate on the one hand him being entirely honest and basically just admitting that yes, the reason why our governments are taking this approach to raise these interest rates and to try to force more people out of the workplace, which is exactly what Jerome Powell said was part of the goal of his policy at the Federal Reserve, and he's being actually honest here because that is the goal, right? And so this is a concept that actually Karl Marx himself, said was called the Reserve Army of Labor. Okay, and so basically what he outlines here, and I'll link this down below if you want to go read a little bit more into it. You can read his Capital Volume 1. It's chapter 25 if you want to go read the specifics on this aspect of the Reserve Army of Labor. But essentially what he was referring to is exactly what this guy Tim Gurner was just talking about, right? We need under a capitalist system, or they need under a capitalist system, for unemployment to constantly exist, right? Not people who can't work, but people who want to work but can't find a job. We need that pool of people who are unemployed and unable to find jobs to exist in perpetuity, right? We can't have, full employment. We can't have everybody having a job and making a decent wage and all of that stuff under capitalism, because you need that reserve army of labor to be standing in place as basically a threat to the people who are currently on the bottom rung of the economic ladder and who do have jobs but maybe are working for minimum wage or close to minimum wage. And you want that threat threat to exist, because then those people feel, okay, I am not secured in my position, even though I'm on the bottom rung of the ladder, right? I'm not secured in my position economically within society, right? I could lose my job. I could become homeless, right? I won't be able to feed my family. I won't be able to keep a roof over my head, all of that stuff, right? So that's why capitalism as an economic system needs this unemployed pool of labor to exist at all times. It is a threat to the working class that if you don't do your job, if you don't shut up and accept these wages and these shitty benefits and these shitty, dangerous working conditions, then somebody else who is even lower than you on the economic ladder, right, and can't find a job right now, they may step in and take your place. So that's exactly correct, sort of, in his analysis here. He's just talking about it from, not from the perspective of those workers who are suffering under this economic, condition that we have set up in the United States and around the world. He's talking about this from the perspective of the business owner and basically making the argument we need to put these people in place, right? During the COVID pandemic, nobody wants to work. I mean, it's entirely a bullshit narrative that has been deconstructed and obliterated a million times over. It's not that nobody wants to work. It's that you need to actually provide people with a living wage and decent benefits and decent working conditions, and then plenty of people will want to take that job. But corporations don't want to do that because they want to maintain their maximal, profit margins that they can dish out to shareholders and their CEOs and their executives who rely on the surplus value of the labor of the people who are working at these companies. Okay, so again, I kind of appreciate this guy coming out and saying the quiet part out loud, because this is what basically every single wealthy billionaire, millionaire, capitalist in the United States and around the world believes, but they're not willing to always come out and make it explicitly clear for us. So again, I guess credit to him in some way for coming out and straight up saying we need more pain in the economy. We need more pain. I mean, keep in mind, just in the United States alone, I mean, we're seeing credit card debt skyrocketing, housing unaffordability is reaching all-time highs, right? I mean, we still have hundreds of thousands of people who are homeless in the United States. We have a situation where like less than a handful of people have more wealth than the bottom half of the American, society combined. I mean, it's an absurd political system. It's an absurd economic system, but this is the system that they're defending. This is the system that they think makes the most sense. This is the, end of history perspective, right? There's no way that we could possibly have a more democratic economy. And that goes, in his view, both for unions and for some alternative system like socialism or communism or whatever you want to call it, right? These are the same guys who don't even think that like unions have a right to go out and make demands. And keep in mind, I mean, in the United States, we're on the the verge of seeing a lot more major unions going out on strike. The UAW comes to mind. That deadline, as a reminder, is going to be this Thursday night, 11:59 p.m. On Friday, we'll basically see them on their first day of strike, assuming that no miraculous deal gets on the table. But these are the same kinds of guys who will turn around and attack those unions. Why do they attack them? Well, it's because they are somewhat of a mild check and a democratic check on the authoritarian, nature of this kind of a capitalist system. And so there you have it, Tim Gurner. Now it gets better, okay, from here, because apparently this guy, Tim Gurner, is the same guy who basically ushered in this wave a couple of years ago about how this narrative that, millennials or young people or Gen Z people, that the reason that they can't afford to function or live in society in the United States or around the world in the way that previous generations has, it's not because of the decimation of the working class and the decimation of unions and the hollowing out of our manufacturing base and the obliteration of the middle class or the American dream in the form of trying to buy a home and be able to provide for yourself and your family on one job salary or something like that. It's not because of any of those reasons. Capitalism, for sure, is not to blame in this guy's view. It's actually because millennials and young people are too busy buying avocado toast. So at this point, like, this avocado toast narrative has sort of like become a meme. It's been memed into oblivion at this point. But this is one of the guys who wrote the original pieces, okay, who was perpetuating this narrative. Okay, so the avocado toast guy has circled back around. He's given us another take, and this time it's that we actually need more pain in the American economy, right? And this is coming at a time where, we're having interesting debates, I guess, or disagreements, where the Biden administration is basically coming out and they're touting Bidenomics, and they're saying, look at GDP growth, look at all of these other top-level metrics within society. Isn't the economy doing phenomenally well? And there's just this complete detachment from sort of those, metrics like the GDP, right? And the actual reality of average working class people on the ground. I mean, again, all of those things I just mentioned, housing unaffordability, gas prices, inflation at the supermarket, all of these things, yes, they've gone slightly down, over the last year or so, and maybe you give some tangential credit to some of Biden's policies on that, but the reality is we still live in a society where the wealth of this country, the wealthiest country that has ever existed on the face of humanity, okay, is concentrated in the hands of not just the top 1%, but in the top 0.1%, okay? We have, again, a handful of people who control more wealth than the bottom half of this country, okay? It's an unsustainable economic system. It's an unsustainable political system. We're seeing this more and more with the successes of sort of far-right fake populists. Really, in actuality, they're fascists at the end of the day. And we're sort of seeing this system collapse in on itself in real time. And we have all of these billionaires and these millionaire elites who are coming out and trying to insist that not only is it the fault of younger generations or poor or working class people, okay, for not being responsible enough for their money, because they're going out and they're buying all of this avocado toast or whatever the fuck. Not only is it their fault, but we actually need to see more pain within the economies around the world. All these capitalist governments, we need more labor pain, okay, in order to allow capitalism to continue as a system, in order to allow for these same multimillionaires and billionaires to continue shoveling money out of the pockets of working class Americans and towards the top.